Oh, I know that sound. It's time for the Beer and News Report. Hi, and welcome to the Beer and News Report. Cheers. Today I'm drinking Veltins Pilsner by Brauerei Veltins. I don't speak German, but my guess is Brauerei is German for brewery. So this beer is made by the Veltins Brewery. Makes sense to me. In any case, it's hot out there. It's above 90. I need something to cool me down, something that's smooth and refreshing. This does it. So I like Pilsners. I give this one 5 stars on Untappd. I think you should give it a try on a hot day, or really any day for that matter, right? Yeah. Cheers. There's an elephant in the room, and we might as well start talking about it. That elephant is called abortion, or more to the point, the discussion of the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, which is the federal law that permits abortions. That's what this show is going to be about. First, we'll define abortion, then go into other government laws which ban things like alcohol, that was called Prohibition, and the war on drugs, and how these programs started, how effective they were, and was there any downside to the programs. Finally, we'll end with some thoughts on what could happen if Roe versus Wade gets overturned, how likely that outcome is to happen, and if there's any alternatives. So grab a beer. Of course, you know, if you're pregnant, don't grab a beer. It'd be cool if you had a pro-lifer and a pro-choicer next to each other while watching this so you can get some interaction going on. In any case, let's have the show begin. Cheers. Okay, what is abortion? According to the Oxford Dictionary, abortion is the deliberate termination of a human pregnancy. Wikipedia defines abortion as the termination of a pregnancy by removal or expulsion of the embryo or fetus. All right, we now know what an abortion is, but how do they do it? Well, there's 2 ways to have an abortion. One is a medical procedure, and the other way is by using abortion pills. The medical procedure is called D&E, which stands for dilation and extraction. That means that when you go in for the procedure, they're going to dilate you, which means increase the vaginal opening, and then the doctor will extract the fetus. This is usually done through suction, and that's it. That's a medical abortion. The other way is with the abortion pill, and it's gaining popularity. It now accounts for over 40% of the abortions in the U.S. There are 2 types of pills, mifepristone, and the other is misoprostol. I'm pretty sure I'm saying those wrong, but just go with it. The way it works is you take mifepristone first, and then you take the misoprostol next. You can go wait up to 48 hours. And basically, these 2 drugs induce a miscarriage. I mean, obviously, you're going to have cramps and bleeding as your body's trying to get rid of the fetus. Just so you know, these drugs can be taken at home, so it's a more private, more comfortable setting. Of course, if anything goes wrong, stop using the drugs, call your doctor, and get their advice. All right? Cheers. So how often does this happen? In 2019, there were 630,000 abortions. That sounds like a lot. Is that trending upward? Well, as you can see from this chart, abortions peaked at around 1981. Since then, we've slowly been trending downward. Now, is that because women are having more babies instead of abortions? Well, some states are approving stricter abortion laws. The fact is, though, that women in the U.S. are just not having more babies. But according to the CDC, the Brookings Institute, the Guttmacher Institute, and a number of other websites, there are several reasons why abortions are going down. I've already mentioned one, which is the stricter state laws, but also better birth control and, believe it or not, better sex education. And you've probably heard on the news that several states have a 16-week or later abortion ban. Now, is that because abortions happen after 16 weeks? Well, no. If you look at this chart, you can see that most abortions happen before 16 weeks. So these laws really don't diminish the amount of abortions that happen. Now, these state laws say that you can't have an abortion if you're raped or due to incest. Is that the main reason why women have abortions? Is it because they have been raped or it's incest? Again, according to this chart from the USA Today, no. Rape makes up about 1% of the abortions, and incest is even less than that. So these state laws aren't really going to affect the amount of abortions that are happening currently. Of course, if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, well, that's a whole different story. Yeah, cheers. If the Supreme Court does overturn Roe v. Wade, then it's going to be up to the states to decide whether abortion is legal or illegal. Several states, mainly in the South and in the Midwest, have said that they will make abortions illegal. On the flip side, states in the West and on the northern East Coast are making laws for abortions to be even more accessible. So let's talk about this. In the past, when our government has banned something, what was the outcome? Well, if we go back to January 16, 1919, the government just ratified the 18th Amendment, which banned the manufacture, transport, and sale of liquors. This was called Prohibition. It doesn't take effect until January 17th of 1920, but why was it passed in the first place? Well, back in the 1800s, there were waves of religious revivalism happening, and states were passing prohibition laws on their own. For instance, in 1838, Massachusetts passed a law that alcohol could only be sold in 15-gallon barrels or larger. They thought this would cut down on the sales, as normal people couldn't afford it or carry something that big. I guess they didn't know about Costco back then. Cheers. Then, in 1851, Maine passed its prohibition law, which banned the manufacture and sale of alcohol, but by 1856 it was repealed. But to its credit, 12 other states followed Maine's prohibition law. Now, are you kind of getting a feeling of deja vu? This sounds familiar, doesn't it, where the states are following other states? All right, now because alcohol was seen as a destructive force in families and marriages, in 1906, a new wave of attacks by the Anti-Saloon League rose out of the evangelical Protestants, which viewed saloon culture to be corrupt and ungodly. Factory owners also wanted prohibition because this would help prevent accidents at work and increase the efficiency of the workers. And this wasn't the first time this happened. In 1917, during World War I, President Wilson instituted a temporary prohibition, but that was to save grain to make food and give it to the soldiers. Now, Congress jumped on this by making the 18th Amendment and built into it a 7-year time limit. Representative Andrew Volstead of Minnesota championed the Prohibition bill, which was called the Volstead Act. The problem was that the federal and local governments had trouble enforcing this act. People at home and hidden from the law were making moonshine, or sometimes called bathtub gin, and then selling it to their friends and family. This was called bootlegging. Prohibition also promoted criminal activity as organized crime capitalized on the people's desire to drink. Illegal drinking spots called speakeasies were formed, and organized crime cleaned up. It is estimated that Al Capone, the famous Chicago gangster, was making $60 million a year in his heyday. That's an amazing sum of money considering it was in the 1920s. Yeah, cheers. But it wasn't all that bad. In the beginning, there was a 30% drop in alcohol consumption and a decline in drunkenness arrests. Near the end of Prohibition, only the middle class and upper class were able to drink. The poor and working class couldn't afford it. So those people and the spiraling costs for jails, prisons, and law enforcement weakened support for Prohibition. Plus, the Prohibition movement became controlled by fundamentalists, and they pushed out the moderates, making Prohibition even more aggressive. You know, there it is again, that deja vu, right? Everything's getting stronger and stronger. By 1932, the Great Depression was on, and President Hoover needed to find a way to make jobs and create new industries. He didn't see it, but that allowed Franklin Delano Roosevelt to beat President Hoover in the 1932 elections by saying that he was going to end Prohibition and produce those new jobs. So on December 5th, 1933, the 21st Amendment was ratified, which reversed the 18th Amendment. The time for Prohibition was over, and people could legally drink again. Now, my viewers are smart, and I know what you're thinking. Hey, Art, if Prohibition started in 1920 and ended in 1933, that's more than 7 years, and 7 years was supposed to be the time limit that law was put in place. Well, that just goes to show you that when the government puts something in place, like taxes, it rarely goes away. Yeah, cheers. Okay, moving forward, the war on drugs. Drugs have been around since the beginning of man, and they're not limited to the United States, they're worldwide. But let's take a quick look at how widespread drugs were. When Coca-Cola first came out, it had a little cocaine in it. At the time, cocaine was legal. Even Sears and Roebuck had cocaine syringes for $1.50 in their catalog back in 1890. By 1909, the Smoking Opium Exclusion Act was passed, which banned the possession, importation, and use of opium for smoking. But you could still use it for medication. This was the start of the war on drugs, as this was the first law to ban the non-medical use of a drug. A number of other laws came out that taxed drugs, but they didn't make them illegal. Laws like the Harrison Act of 1914, which regulated the production, importation, and distribution of opiates and cocaine. And then in 1937, there was the Marijuana Tax Act. This placed a tax on the sale of marijuana. So drugs were fine as long as the government could tax them. It wasn't until 1970 that President Nixon passed the Controlled Substance Act, which set regulations for certain drugs. This is where we get the Schedule 5 classifications of drugs based on their medical application and potential for abuse. So for instance, a Schedule 1 drug is considered the most dangerous, and that's where you get heroin and LSD and marijuana. And a Schedule 5 drug is something like cough syrup with small amounts of codeine in it. President Nixon did this because of the rise of recreational drugs during the 60s. He also created the Drug Enforcement Administration, otherwise known as the DEA, in 1973. He really didn't like to party. Cheers. Now, as you know, President Nixon resigned from office because of Watergate. So in the mid-70s, the war on drugs kind of cooled down a bit. In fact, President Carter in 1977 actually decriminalized having up to 1 ounce of marijuana. But then in the 1980s, President Reagan came into office. He reinforced and expanded many of Nixon's war on drug policies. And his wife, Nancy, launched the Just Say No campaign, which was intended to highlight the dangers of drug use. Do you remember those commercials? My high school friends thought they were funny. Anyways, in 1986, Congress passed the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, which established mandatory minimum prison sentences for certain drug offenses. Now, this was considered racist because if you got caught with 500 grams of powdered cocaine, which was the drug choice of white people, you got the same sentence as for someone who got caught with only 5 grams of crack cocaine, which is the choice of black people. So this led to mass incarcerations for nonviolent drug offenses. In current times, there has been a decrease in public support for the war on drugs. It has been seen as ineffective and costly. In fact, according to the Pew Research Center, some 40 states have reduced their drug laws, lowering penalties and shortening minimum sentences. I mean, just look at how many states have legalized marijuana. Yeah, cheers. So what does this all mean? The Supreme Court is thinking of overturning Roe versus Wade, meaning that the right to have an abortion will be up to the states. Now, Republicans have stated that if Roe v. Wade is overturned and they get control of the House and Senate, they will try to pass a federal law banning abortions. Now, this is easier said than done if the president is a Democrat, because he can overturn or veto the bill that's put forth by the Republicans, which means they would have to get a 2/3 majority to overturn the veto. I don't think they can do it. Looking at the past 2 times the government has banned something, we see that the end result wasn't great. With Prohibition, they were right. Alcohol is bad for you. But banning it just made organized crime an overwhelming force to deal with. People still want to drink. They'll even make their own booze. I think that'll apply to abortions. If you ban abortions, people will still do it themselves. And, you know, with the abortion pill, this will be a lot easier and safer than the old method of using a coat hanger. Now, looking at the war on drugs, all it really did was put a bunch of people in prison. Drug use was hardly effective. Again, organized crime capitalized on it, and now we have Mexican drug cartels, which basically rule Mexico. Now, pro-lifers say that abortion is murder, that life starts at conception. I guess technically that's true, but don't we also have laws against cruel and unusual punishment? Let's say a woman has sex because it feels great and gets pregnant. Now, she's a career woman, she doesn't want to have kids, but because abortions are banned, she has to keep the fetus. Now, because she's a career woman, she probably has enough money to fly to another country and just have an abortion there. But let's say for this thing that she doesn't, right? Does she have to change her lifestyle just because she's forced to stay pregnant? I mean, she doesn't care about the baby, so why would she stop going out with friends and drinking alcohol? Why would she stop taking pain medication if she has a headache or other kind of pain? I mean, she's not going to keep the baby. It's going to be the problem for the state. Now, situation 2. What if she got pregnant because of rape? I mean, talk about cruel and unusual punishment. She has to relive the rape every day for the next 9 months for something she doesn't want. I'm sure thoughts of suicide are going to pop into her head. Finally, if women are forced to keep their pregnancies, do they have to keep it to the full term? Full term being 9 months or 39 weeks. Because babies are considered viable at 24 weeks. So can she just have it then and let the state handle the premature birth? These are tough questions and I don't have the answers for you, but I'm hoping that technology, especially Silicon Valley, get us the answers. They've done it in the past. Cheers. I'm hoping in the next 10 years or so, our technology industry will develop an artificial womb and abortions will become a thing of the past. With an artificial womb, the fetus can be transferred from the mother to the device and grow full term. Now, most likely in the beginning, it'll have to wait until what's called the viable stage, which is 24 weeks. And we have the technology to do this. The current record is 21 weeks and 5 days, but most babies die before 24 weeks. So that's why 24 weeks is the viable time. Now, this would solve the problem of abortions if we can get the artificial womb, right? If we can move the fetus from the mother to this artificial womb at any point in the pregnancy, there's no need for abortions. I'm not sure how much this will cost. I'm sure in the beginning it's going to be really, really, really expensive until they figure out how to make it more efficient. As you do it over and over again, things get better. But hey, someone once told me, don't worry about the cost. When it comes to saving a life, it's more important than money. Well, yeah, that's fine as long as the government's paying for it. Cheers. Well, if you can see my beer is almost empty, and that means we're at the end of the show. If you'd like to contact me, I can be reached at this email address. So what did you think? Should we keep abortions even though some think that it's murder? Or should we ban abortions even though that may cause organized crime to grow? Tough questions. Don't have the answer for you. Anyways, I hope you liked the show. And if you did, please click that like button. If you want to get notified of new shows, you click that subscribe button, the bell icon next to it. and that'll notify you when a new show's been posted. Till then, keep your beer cold and your interest hot. Cheers.